Manifest Destiny by Marlene Zach, Cathy No, Harris Roberts, and Stefano Pinti. Block 1, November 23, 2009.
The Manifest Destiny was a belief or doctrine that was held chiefly in the middle and later part of the 19th century. It was believed that it was the destiny of the United States to expand its territory over the whole of North America and to extend and enhance its political, social, and economic influences. America upheld its flag and was too proud of the rapid development. At the time, the United States was a large country with underdeveloped land. In order for the United States to expand, they would have to risk war with Great Britain, which claimed the Pacific Northwest, and with Mexico, which held what is now Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, California, and part of Colorado. If the United States were to be victorious, the outcome would reduce 75,000 Spanish-speaking people and 150,000 Indian people to subject status. Such a conquest would not be 100% successful. In 1845, John O'Sullivan wrote a thesis about how it is the destiny of the United States to expand and take over, and, quote, our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions. He was the editor of the Democratic Review, who was a part of the newspaper party.
The frontier of inclusion was positive contact between Indians and Europeans and whites. Spanish, British, Russian, and American ships traded for sea otter skins and beaver skins from the 1780s to 1810. However, contact with Europeans led to many deaths of people on both sides because of diseases. The frontier of inclusion also included the establishment of Hudson's Bay Company fur trading post. At the Convention of 1818, the United States and Great Britain agreed to jointly occupy Oregon country. The frontier of exclusion included small wars against natives and whites. It was the opposite of the frontier of inclusion.
Santa Fe was first settled in 1609 by colonists from Mexico. The trip from Missouri over the Santa Fe Trail was 900 miles over plains, deserts, and mountains. There was much of a danger of attacks from Indians, especially the Comanches and the Apaches, who did not tolerate trespassers. Settlements and trading posts grew because of profits made by trappers and traders in the Mexican territory.
The overland trail traveled from the Missouri River to Oregon and California. It was a long, slow, tedious, dangerous, and expensive journey. By 1805, 5,000 settlers arrived at Oregon and 3,000 to California by 1848. Many families were traveling from familiar areas to alienated worlds away from home and were strangers in a strange land. Such voyages cost between $500 to $1,000 because of the use of wagons, oxen, food supply, clothing, and tools. Families would travel by large groups and assist each other in the troublesome circumstances, such as crossing rivers and mountains. Reasons for such ridiculous trips were for promised economic opportunity and healthy surroundings compared to that of the malaria-prone Midwest since the Panic of 1837. Men sought after adventure and women were searching for an ideal home. While traveling, the men took care of moving equipment and animals, whereas women cooked and watched the children. Many died from diseases such as cholera, which took the lives of thousands of people in 1849 and the early 1850s. It was spread through contaminated water and caused vomiting and diarrhea, leading to dehydration and eventually death, usually overnight. An uncommon factor that did not contribute to the death of pioneers was the infrequent Indian attacks. By 1860, 300,000 people traveled through the Overland Trail to Oregon to California. The wagon train era ended, fortunately, because of transcontinental railroads in 1869.
In the 1890s, Frederick Jackson Turner, America's most famous historian, observed that the repeated experience of settling new frontiers across the continent had shaped Americans into a uniquely adventurous, optimistic, and democratic people.
Occurred in the 1840s, it was the enthusiasm carried on by a wave of Midwest farmers who made up the majority of Oregon's permanent settlers, who were lured by free land and patriotism. It was also the shift from the frontier of inclusion to frontier of exclusion. In 1845, Oregon boasted 5,000 American settlers, most of who were living in the Willamette Valley and laying claim to lands to which they had no legal right. The United States and Britain did not yet conclude treaties with the Oregon Indians. African Americans, free and enslaved, were also not allowed to settle in the Oregon Territory because the settlers hoped to build a community feeling between white settlers of the North and the South.
In 1854, James K. Polk coined the slogan 54-40 or fight, meaning that the United States would go to war if it did not get control of all the territory south of latitude 54-40, the border between Russian Alaska and British Canada. Thus, in June 1846, Britain and the United States compromised a treaty to establish the 49th parallel as the United States-Canada, but leaving Vancouver for Britain.
George Bush was an African-American pioneer who was brought to Oregon anyway and deliberately settled north of the Columbia River, later becoming the Washington Territory. The rebellion later led to other appearances of African-American slaves.
Benn's Fort was on the Arkansas River in what is now eastern Colorado. There was a brisk trade in beaver skins and buffalo robes. There was also multi-ethnic populations. The fort was inhabited by Josepha Tafoya of Taos and her husband, a carpenter from Pennsylvania, African-American cooks, French tailors from New Orleans, Mexican muleteers, and a number of Indian women, including 2 Cheney women who were the successive wives of William Bent, the co-founder of the fort. Benn's Fort consisted of 3 communities of the Pablo, Hardscrabble, and Greenhorn. They were populated by men of all nationalities and Mexican and Indian wives. All 3 lived by trapping, hunting, and farming. Benn's Fort was racially and economically mixed.
The idea of manifest destiny did not agree with those of the Whigs, for they did not fully support expansionism because of fear of extension of slavery to new territories. However, they did like the idea of strong government policies and industrialization. Despite this fact, the Democrats supported expansionism, but also feared industrialization because of the consequences of the Panic of 1837 and the economic depression, which included uncontrolled urban growth and growing social unrest. The Democrats wanted to continue to follow Thomas Jefferson's vision of agriculture in new territories, which would in turn counterbalance industrialization. Much of this reasoning was that of wealthy politicians. As for the average farmer, they wished to move west for land, hunger, national pride, plain curiosity, and the sense of adventure.